Okay, so just to start us off, I want to just ground us in this concept of the digital use divide and in our work towards promoting equity, the importance as educators of us thinking about this concept of equity of opportunity, and the importance in our instructional design of us creating opportunities for students to develop critical skills leveraging technology that we know are going to be important for them in the workforce that they're going to be entering into. And so creating opportunities for students to move from passive consumers of using technology to being active users and producers and creators, people who have the skills to produce media and to design and connect with experts and peers across the globe, to code and to collaborate. So that's sort of our why. I just want to share this resource. Our district has a digital learning scope and sequence that's aligned to the ISTE standards for students. ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education. They have been publishing technology standards for students for the past 15 years or so. Our scope and sequence is aligned to the ISTE standards, and also our SFUSD graduate profile, which names leadership, empathy, and collaboration as one of the competencies we want to build in students. So the session aligns with that. Check out the scope and sequence for ideas for how you can integrate technology into your curriculum, both in a virtual and blended environment. And then if you're wondering what apps students can use, we also have this page, sfusd.edu/apps. All of those apps have been vetted for student data privacy concerns, educational impact, etc. So I'm basically going to be talking about how we can facilitate collaboration using the tools on that page. You'll also find training resources for most of the tools there. So that should be a good resource for you to figure out what you can use to facilitate distance learning. And finally, for framing, just want to talk about the importance of providing opportunities for students to collaborate through their education. The Gold Evans architectural firm led this survey with companies and nonprofits, asking what are the critical skills that they're looking for in their employees. And at the very top is collaboration and the ability to work in teams. We are using technology to collaborate virtually. Let's give our students opportunities to do that as well. Obviously with COVID, we're all experiencing some level of isolation. And so, to the greatest degree possible that we can still make learning social and collaborative, let's do that. Okay, so we're gonna kind of like go in order of complexity, starting with kind of like a simple strategy and then moving down into a little bit more complex strategies. So starting with discussion forums. So I'm gonna talk about Google Classroom. I know some of the younger grades are using Seesaw, and some of these strategies can definitely be done in Seesaw too. But in Google Classroom, you can create discussion forums for students to discuss any number of topics. On the picture on the right, we have students who were preparing for their essay on George Orwell's 1984, and they were pulling quotes. They were discussing what they think Orwell's thesis in that book was, what their thesis for their essay was going to be. And it was a great way for students to exchange ideas and be able to build on one another's ideas in preparation for their essay by leveraging the discussion forum in Google Classroom. So we can't have, webinars or seminars in person, but we can host seminars through Zoom and breakout rooms, but also through Google Classroom and discussion forums. I'm just going to pop into Google Classroom real quick. So to create an online discussion forum, here's what it looks like. And this is not the most robust example because I don't have a ton of responses, but you can see that you end up with this running stream. You can see who has responded to the question and who still needs to. Students can reply to each other's answers, so they can pose questions. They can, provide analysis, engage in back and forth discussion. Let me go back to the stream. or to classwork, sorry. You can see with this question, I attached a video. So you can attach any number of materials to the question to ask students to view that material and then answer questions about that material. It's just a great way to make learning interactive and a little bit more robust, rather than having them read an article and answer questions and turn them into you. They can actually engage in academic discussion. So for online discussion forums in Google Classroom, all you need to do is just like create an assignment. So you go to create, and then you create a question, and you have the option between multiple choice for like taking a poll or short answer. And short answer is where you're going to get that online discussion forum. And you can add any sort of content to that, anything from your Google Drive, a link to a website or web page, a file, a YouTube video, etc. And you can also create docs, slides, sheets, drawings, forms, etc. with that question. So in a nutshell, that's online discussion forums. And I encourage you to use those in Google Classroom. I've seen a lot of educators using Google Classroom just to push out assignments and collect assignments, but it can really be a really robust collaboration and communication tool. We're going to talk a little bit more about ways you can use Classroom for collaboration. One thing I'll just note, though, I'm sure some people are wondering about what to do about inappropriate comments. So something that's good to know about Google Classroom is you can always delete a post, and you can also mute students if something was inappropriate and you need to address digital citizenship with them and online communication. So next to any comment, there's the 3 dots here, and you can choose to mute that participant. I'll go ahead and just mute my my personal account. So they can still submit work, they can't reply to classmates' work, and they can't comment or post. So I can go ahead and mute that person. Okay, so now that person's not going to be able to post. I should be able to delete, there should be able to a way to delete that comment too. Not seeing that right now. But so if I wanted to, so let's say, I muted somebody, I had a conversation with them about our norms for classroom communication, I want to unmute them. In Classroom, I can always go to people, and I can find that person. There are a lot of people in here, so I think I won't waste your time finding myself, but you can always click somebody's profile, and then there are actions, and that's where you would find mute or unmute. So if you need to temporarily mute them or unmute them, that's how you can do it. Okay, so that's online discussion forums in Google Classroom. So next thing I want to talk about, another strategy for facilitating communication, particularly around text or articles, readings, are online reading discussions with Google Docs. And so essentially the strategy here is just taking an article that you want students to read and discuss, copying it, pasting it into a Google Doc, and then sharing that either with the whole class of students or a small group of students or a pair of students, depending on who you want to discuss the article. And let me show you an example of what that ends up looking like once a number of people have interacted with the text. So here's an article by Matt Miller about listing collaborative activities with using the Google Suite, starting on his 3rd idea for shared research notes. And you can see what people did is they read through the article, and you can, if there's a quote that speaks to you or that you want to discuss, you can highlight it, and then you can add a comment here. And you can add your analysis or pose a question for your classmates, and then students are able to reply to each other's comments about that text, so their questions or their comments. So that's a way you can have text-based online discussions in a virtual environment by just copying and pasting an article into Google Docs. When you share it, you're going to want to share it with so that people can comment, not that they can edit, because you don't want people deleting text or editing the text, right? And so when you share, you can change permissions. I have anyone in SFUSD can view, but really what I would want is anyone in SFUSD can comment. Or I'd want to, like I said, share it with specific students, like a group of 4 students that I want to discuss that article. Okay. If people want to practice that as I'm going, I'm not going to pause. We were going to do an interactive activity, but just given time and the fact that we're live streaming, I'm going to keep moving. But if people want to practice that and just see what that's like from a student experience, which I think has value, Ricardo, the link here that says this article, you could throw that in the chat and people could just go in and add a comment or pose a question just to kind of see what that's like from a student experience. You're muted, but I think you just said okay.
I did say okay.
Yeah.
I'm also trying to answer the questions on the side over here too, so give me a chance to get that link.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. All right, so the next strategy I want to talk about is using shared slide decks to facilitate collaboration. And here's an example of a shared slide deck template. And so the idea here is that, you know, depending on the activity, you're creating a template for students to fill in. And once you've created that template, I'm just letting my slides load. Once you've created that first slide that's your template, you can right click on the slide and you can duplicate the slide. And then I like to just, you know, and then just repeat that action until you have enough. To do it quickly, of course, you can highlight a bunch of slides, copy them, and then paste them once you've got a good number. And so, yeah, so it's essentially just building the template. Students, you can facilitate this by giving students a number, assigning them a number so that they find the slide associated with the number. You could put their names on there ahead of time, you know, or you can have students just go in. First thing they do is put their name on the slide. They claim that slide, you know, depending on what would work best for your students. So that strategy can be used for a number of things. It could be used for an exit ticket. Let me show you an example of using that as an exit ticket. This is something I used when I ran this webinar, and it was a little bit more interactive with smaller numbers. And essentially at the end of the session, ask people, you know, what's a collaboration strategy that you've taken away from the session that you plan to use with your students? And people went and found a slide and added a picture and shared the strategy they're going to take away, what they learned for the day, right? So that'd be a way of using shared slide decks as an exit ticket. And the neat thing here, people can add their images, pictures directly from the slide deck. So you can go to Insert, Image, and Camera. And then you have the ability to just take a photo, snap it in there, and move it around. And that's a nice way, especially, you know, in virtual environment where students aren't live seeing each other face to face. That's a way for your students to get to know each other. So, you know, thinking about another strategy for using shared slide decks for community building, right? You might have students introduce themselves using a shared slide deck at the beginning of the year. Another really neat thing about slides that's kind of new is the ability to insert audio. So, you know, instead of, like, if you're gonna have students introduce themselves using a shared slide deck at the beginning of the year, you might have them like write an introduction about themselves, you know, something meaningful about themselves, and then record it using something like online audio recorder. I think it's online voice recorder. I can share a link to that later. And then they add that voice recording to their Google Drive, and then they can insert it into the slide. And that'd be a nice way to include student voice and for students to be able to hear from each other. They could also respond to each other's slides with a voice recording, giving each other feedback. You might also do something like a document or image-based analysis as a collaborative activity using a shared slide deck. This could be, for example, as a way to like launch into a project and generate interest and generate questions that might be used for further research. So if I were doing something around the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial justice movements that surfaced this, well, that have been around for a long time, but got a lot of attention this summer, I might create a slide deck with pictures and ask people to use the comment feature. Again, just click on the picture and click add comment. If I've set the sharing permissions for people to be able to comment, and then they can use a prompt like I notice, I think, I wonder, to share what they're observing in this picture, what they think it means, and what questions are coming up for them as they go through the slide and engage with the pictures or the documents. So you could put text in there, historical text, primary sources, right, and ask students to engage in analysis and questions. Like I said, you could put a video in there, text, images, right, etc. Have people discuss using the comment feature. You can have students create a collaborative presentation, and you might choose to create a template for what that presentation is going to look like for each slide, or have them start from scratch. And then you can use shared slide decks for peer feedback too. So you might have students share a project that they're working on that's in an iterative draft form. And then they can use the comment feature to give feedback on their work. So here's an example where if I were doing a podcasting project, I've got a template here for students to grab a slide, insert their podcast logo, and then insert their initial draft audio recording. And again, students can go through, they can listen to each other's recording. Okay, pause that. And then they can use the comment feature to give feedback. I'll talk a little bit more about peer feedback in a little bit. So just want to pause for a second. Are there any questions that you want to raise for the larger group, Ricardo? You're muted.
I know I'm muted. So there's some fast and furious questions that I'm trying to answer on the side to see if one of them is one that'd be for the larger group. So one of them is, can we discuss how to facilitate collaboration with non-SFUSD entities?
Well, I mean, in terms of sharing settings, the settings would just need to be set as anyone instead of anyone in SFUSD. Let me get back to that. So, I talked about sharing settings, and let me open that up. We've got anyone in SFUSD can comment. You could always change that to anyone with the link, and then people outside of SFUSD can access the document or the slide and collaborate. All right, I'm going to continue on. We'll have more pause points.
All right.
Okay, so another great collaboration tool is Padlet. It's super simple, which is sort of part of what makes it great, but a really powerful tool for facilitating collaboration. This is what Padlet looks like when you create a Padlet. So you can customize the background, you give it a title and some instructions, and then students access it using a link. So you can share a link to Google Classroom, for example, for students to access the Padlet. All students need to do to add content is click this little plus button in the lower right corner. And when they do, a little post-it pops up here where they can give it a title, they can write some text, and then they have tons of ways that they can respond using Padlet. So they can upload content from their computer. So if they've created a podcast, for example, and downloaded that to their computer, they can upload that and share with their class this way. So another way to organize peer feedback, for example. They can add links to any articles, for example. So if you're doing a shared research project and you want to curate resources for that research project, then this would be a great place to do that. You can include anything from the web. You can include, you can take a photo. So again, this could be a good way to do some community building in the beginning of the class where students, add a photo, introduce themselves. And then there are lots of other ways that people can respond. They can capture video. They can record their voice and add audio. They can record their screen. And then there's even a drawing tool that they can use, for example, for like working on a math problem or representing information visually. You have a few different ways that you can, set a Padlet up. I tend to use the wall, which is just going to kind of automatically arrange things into a nice fitting grid. But you can also do the shelf, which is going to arrange things based on titles. So that'd be a good way if you wanted people to respond to a prompt in a way that categorizes information. Like if you were going to do a KWL chart, for example, you can set those up so that the categories, are KWL, and students can respond underneath what they know, what they want to know, and what they learned. Canvas is good for organizing ideas. So if you're doing like concept mapping, or again, if you're doing a shared research project and you want to kind of organize your ideas, this could be a great way for students to plan their research. When you create a Padlet, you have a few different options for settings that I think are important to pay attention to. You can turn attribution on or off. Students don't have to sign in to post if attribution is off, which, in some cases might be desirable. But, obviously a lot of times we want to know who, which student posted the work or left the comment. And so you can put attribution on to see who, for students' names to show up when they post. You can turn comments on or off, so students have the ability to comment on each other's posts, which is great. That's a great way to give feedback. So that might be something that you want to turn on. People have different ways that they can react to student posts. So you can decide for people to be able to like each other's posts, where the little heart shows up and shows how many likes they got. They can respond with stars 1 through 5. They can upvote. So, you might use voting, for example, if you're trying to vote on like class norms for communication or collaboration or something like that. But I think you also don't want it to feel competitive for students. So you might turn reactions off if students are sharing work and you don't want them to be paying too much attention to how many likes they got. You can require approval so that anything that students post, you get a notification before it shows up publicly for other students to see. And then finally, this filter profanity will replace profanity with emojis. So I am not going to play, I was going to play a short clip from this video. This is a tutorial on using Padlet, but just for the sake of time, I think I'll keep moving. But this is here for you, how to teach remotely with Padlet. Great short video, around 9 minutes or so. One thing to know about Padlet is that if you're using the free version, you only you're allowed to make up to 3 Padlets, unless you've been using Padlet for a while and you had more than 3 to begin with. But if you need more space, if you need to create a new Padlet, you can always delete a Padlet, and so and then you have space to create a new one. So it's not something like you create 3 and you're done. You can always delete them and then create more. And I think I covered all this information. Yeah. Okay, so that's Padlet. Did I have a? Yeah, okay, so that's Padlet. I want to talk a little bit about Google Jamboard too. This is what Jamboard looks like. Again, there's a video tutorial here that I'm linking in that you can watch on your own time on how to use Google Jamboard for remote teaching. Really great video, chock full of ideas for how to use it in social studies, math, etc. So when you're creating a Jamboard, and I'll go into Jamboard and show you what it looks like in a second, you can choose to share the Jamboard with specific students. The sharing works the same way as Google Slides or Google Docs. So you click on the share button in the top right corner, and then again, you can share with specific people. Or you can set the sharing settings to anyone can edit. and then share in Google Classroom. So if you want just like a small group of 4 students to use this, share it with those specific students. If you want the whole class using it, share it through Google Classroom. When you're using, if you're using Jamboard during a live synchronous session, you can always change access from edit to view only. If you want to pause students writing on the Jamboard, you can always just change it to view only. There is unfortunately no revision history in Google Jamboard. So if you have, I know there have been some teachers that have had problems with students erasing other students' work. And unfortunately, there's no way to see who did that through revision history. But if you do have a student doing that and you can figure out who it is, you can always remove their access from the Jamboard and address digital citizenship with them. And so Jamboard's a great way for students to brainstorm, organize research, make predictions or inferences about images that you import into Jamboard. They could use Jamboard to create a prototype using multiple slides as part of a design process, or as a summative activity capturing what they learned. And yeah, so, and then just in terms of collaboration, you could create separate Jamboards for each student or a group of students, or you can have multiple pages in a single Jamboard and assign a page, just like a shared slide deck, a page to student groups. So I'm gonna go into this Jamboard and just kind of show you what this looks like. And I'll throw this in the chat if people want to jump on there. We have probably more participants than are going to be able to access the Jamboard, but at least a few people could go in and do that. Let me just get the chat. So there's a link to the Jamboard if people want to go in and just kind of play around. But essentially, this is what Jamboard looks like. These are your options for how you can respond. There's a drawing tool. You have multiple different styles of pen and colors. So you can draw, excuse my handwriting. There's an erase tool, so you can always erase what you've done. There is a sticky note tool, so I can add a sticky note, change the color, and use this to brainstorm or share ideas. And I see people are in there, and all those sticky notes are going to stack up here, so you can move them around. You can change the size. You can rotate, etc. You can add images, so you can do like a Google search. Like if we're doing a project, like you'll see in the next in a slide I'll show you in a second, but if we're doing a project on rainforests, I can do a Google image search and import images that I associate with the topics that we're looking at. And again, we can move things around, organize them, etc. Nice to see everybody in there. And then we have a laser tool. So if I'm presenting and I have everybody on view only, so it's not going crazy, and I want to draw attention to things, I can do that with the laser tool. I can also create multiple pages. So you'll see here, I'm going to click through the pages as people are working. Here's an old one where we were brainstorming subtopics for our research project on rainforests. Okay, and we might look into climate and biodiversity, etc. You can change the background, so you can have, you can do like graph paper, lined paper, different color backgrounds, and here's one where somebody's creating basically a diagram, right, to explain scientific concept. And then you can, I think, have up to 20 windows, so I can expand these, and there's little plus buttons to add additional frames. And so that's where I could create like 20 frames, add a sticky note to each frame with the small group's name or student's name who's going to work on that slide. And yeah, so nice to see people in there working. And you can always, delete slides too if you need to clear up space for your Jamboard. So that's Jamboard. Have fun. Feel free to go in and play around. There are probably limitations in how many people can get in there at once. But and if you want to learn more about Jamboard, check out this video. You can download a jam as an image, so a student can download their work as an image and then submit it to Google Classroom if you want to have students submit work from Jamboard that way. And let me just see if I can show how to do that.
Hey, Stu, if you get a chance, there were a few questions about the audio recording feature of something. Please share audio recording resources. So
yeah, the one I mentioned is called Online Voice Recorder. Let me grab a link to that real quick. I'll put a link to that in the chat. So that's going to be something that students could use with Chromebooks to record their voice. They can trim their audio recording and then download that and submit it, add it to a slide or submit it to Google Classroom, etc. Okay. All right, so that's Jamboard. Like I said, there's a video tutorial here that you can check out to learn more. And oh, actually, sorry, I was just showing you, if I'm back in Jamboard, there are the 3 dots here. That's where I can save the frame that I'm on as an image and then submit that to Google Classroom if I'm a student. And again, like I said before, there are different sharing options here, so I can share with specific students. I can change it just like with anything else to anyone on the internet, anyone in SFUSD. Can edit or view. Okay. You can, I guess one other thing to know is you can access Jamboard from the Waffle or from going to jamboard.google.com. So I'm gonna just, oh, sorry, I wasn't sharing there. Let me resume share. I apologize. I wasn't sharing my screen when I showed that. So I just to show you what I was doing, top right corner, if I'm in Jamboard, 3 dots here, you can save frame as image. That'd be if you want to submit an image to Google Classroom. And then, like I said, the sharing options are the same as any other Google product. So those are all there. Okay, so I want to talk about peer feedback using Google Classroom and using the stream in Google Classroom. So I'm just going to go back to my Google Classroom. And I'm going to go to the stream, which is where you kind of are automatically placed when you sign into Google Classroom. And so the stream is the one place that students can post work and post announcements. And so you see here somebody from a previous webinar actually posted a question for the class. Does anyone have a source they like to use for HyperDoc templates? Okay, so that can be a great way for students to pose questions of each other and get support, but also a great place for students to post their work and ask for feedback. So here you have an example where I'm working on this piece of art. I've posted it to the stream, and I've provided specific framing around the kind of feedback I'm looking for. And I got all sorts of great feedback from my classmates on my work, right? So just want to kind of talk about the importance when you're doing peer feedback. Actually, I'll come to that in a second. One thing to note in the settings in Google Classroom is that you have different options for the stream, right? So I have it listed here as students can post and comment so that they can share their work, they can comment on each other's work. You can set it to students can only comment, but they can't post. So they can only comment on like posts that the teacher leaves, but they wouldn't be able to post themselves, or only the teacher can post and comment. And you might want to start the year off with only teachers can post and comment, and then do some work with students around coming up with agreements about online communication, teach them how to give constructive feedback, and then sort of like open up the open things up for students to be able to post and comment. And again, if you ever have a problem, if you've opened it up and you ever have a problem with a student who's posting something inappropriate or leaving inappropriate comments, you can always go back to this People tab, and like I showed you before, find that person, and you can mute that student, and then they're not going to be able to post work. They're not going to be able to comment. That doesn't need to be a permanent status for them. That'd be an opportunity for you to address digital citizenship with them, and then to welcome them back into the virtual community to post and comment. So I put here, it's really important if you're doing peer feedback and you don't give students models of how to provide quality peer feedback, you're just going to get a lot of, this is cool type of comments, things that aren't super constructive. So I linked in here a couple different models that you can use. The tag feedback model is one where you're responding with three prompts, right? So students would tell something they like. This should project in a second. So the T stands for tell something you like. A stands for ask a question, and G stands for give advice or suggestion. So they'd give those three types of feedback. And then the designer, it's always important that the designer thanks them for their suggestions. And so there's a little prompt for how the designer can respond. Got another model, sentence and some sentence frames. So this feedback model is centered around be kind, specific, and helpful. Using specific language to point to exactly what you're talking about. If we're talking about art and somebody's done a self-portrait, talking about eye shape would be really specific, right? Being kind with the words that we use, especially in a virtual environment where text and communication can be a little bit tricky in terms of how it's interpreted. And then helpful, not just telling somebody what's great about their work, but how can they improve it, right? And peer feedback's a great way to foster a growth mindset in our students, right? And then giving them sentence starters for giving both warm and cool feedback so that they can really learn how to give constructive feedback. I'm not going to show it now because of time, but there's a great video in here, Austin's Butterfly, where Ron Berger is walking a group of young students through a lesson where he's teaching them how to give constructive feedback. That'd be a great resource to share with students and run a lesson around doing critique and feedback, or maybe see how he does it and run a similar lesson on Zoom with students. And then also in Google Docs, they can use suggestion mode in Google Docs for giving feedback on writing. The great thing when you're in suggesting mode is, it shows up on the right side here who suggested it. It also assigns a color to them, so you can see color coding in terms of, which student added what content. So that's a great way to organize like collaborative writing and for you to be able to have a sense of who contributed what, and also for students to give each other feedback in Google Docs. Oops. And then there's also version history in Docs. So you can also get a sense, if you're doing like a collaborative writing assignment, you can get a sense of who contributed, how much each student contributed to that writing assignment through looking at revision history. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about Seesaw, but Zareen, and I think there are others actually leading some great webinars on Seesaw, but for the younger students, and even for older students, you might use Seesaw, especially because it allows for so many different ways for students to respond, like photos, drawings, videos, links, etc. But it also allows families to see what their students are doing, and it allows for students to comment on each other's work and just like they can in Google Classroom. So a lot of the similar strategies that we're talking about can be done in Seesaw. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep moving just because of time, because we're a little short on time with this session. All right. So next thing I want to talk about is facilitating group work in a virtual environment. Google Keep is a great tool to help students manage a collaborative project. This is keep.google.com is how to access it. You can also find it in the waffle also. And essentially this is what Google Keep looks like. You can add notes to your Google Keep. You can have them be checkboxes so the students can create like a list of tasks that they have for the week or for the learning cycle in which they're collaborating on a group project. And then they can check those tasks off as they're done. They can assign those tasks to each other, and they can add other types of content. So they can add sketches and attach links, etc. Links, doc slides, etc. If they're in an email and they're communicating about a group project, on the right side in your email is this little bar, and so they can always add a keep note that links to that email. And then I just want to show this idea. We talked about online discussion forums earlier, but you could also use the question to organize group work. And the way you would do that is creating a question again. And this would be kind of like creating a Slack channel for a group of students, right? So creating a short answer question. So that's going to be like a running forum where they can discuss their project. And then instead of assigning it to all students in the class, just assign it to, for example, the group of 4 students that are working together. And then you fill in the rest of the information. I'm not going to go through all of that. I'll show you an example instead of what that ends up looking like. So here's an example, right, where I've created a question, I've assigned it theoretically just to 4 students, and then you can attach all sorts of things to questions just like you can assignments, right? I'll show you that in a second, but I've attached a collaborative slide deck for them to create their presentation together on. I've attached a Jamboard where they can do their brainstorming and organize their research. I've attached a Newsella text set for their topic. I've attached a shared research notes doc, which I'll open. So you might create like a template for shared research notes that asks students to identify who's taking notes in that section, what's the subtopic for their research that they're taking notes on, add their notes and their source. And then that gets shared with that group of students that you've pushed this question out to. And then the nice thing here, oh, you could also attach like a Google Keep note for them to manage their project with. So then, like, as they're going through their cycle of learning or through their project, you know, maybe this is set each week, or maybe this is set through the life of the project, but then they can respond in this forum. They can coordinate around their project and talk, you know, they can talk about what they've done or ask each other, you know, if they've accomplished certain tasks and, you know, establish tasks and just communicate through the project. So again, that was just creating a question as a short answer. And I just was going to show you that, you know, just like assignments, you can add content from Google Drive, files, links, YouTube, or...
So I wanted to do a time check. It is 11 o'clock and we're supposed to break at 11.
Oh, okay. All right, I will just mention then that there are also all sorts of tools that students can use to create collaborative public products. Adobe Spark is a great one. I've put some resources in there where students can create web pages, videos, and graphics collaboratively. And Google Maps, they could create a collaborative interactive map, again, slides we talked about. And then WeVideo and Soundtrap would be for creating videos or audio collaboratively. So you can check those slides out on your own. Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar. The recording will be available if you want to check back on that, and feel free to follow up with any questions. Ricardo, anything you want to add for closing?
There's lots of good resources. You don't need to go far to find them. We have them in-house already. You should use what we have in-house.
Yeah. All righty. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop this session, and best of luck to everybody.